Hey everybody, welcome back to the Court of Random Opinion. My name is Lauren Neidigh. I had a chance to sit down and talk to my friend Rachel last night. You guys might know her from my friend Omar, the Tilted Lawyers channel. Those two did a really good breakdown of the judgment when most of Justin Baldoni's case was dismissed. Rachel is another attorney out in California. She's also a judge on a TV show called Hot Bench, or Hot Court, if you ask my mom, but don't call it that. I could sit here and try to explain to you how well-educated and successful and hardworking she is, but frankly, the finer details of some things have left my brain recently to make room for more information. So what I'll tell you instead is that she's very kind and brilliant, and she always answers my questions and never makes me feel stupid for asking. I love her and I respect her very much, so I appreciated this. She did fill me in on a couple of cases in the beginning of this where I haven't been following them too closely. I thought what she had to say was interesting. Obviously, there's a lot I don't know about how court works still. But I will put a timestamp on when we started to talk about Justin's case, because I know a lot of you are just going to want to skip to that. So I asked her to talk through some things with me because I know there's been a lot of debate around Justin's case with the John Doe lawsuit and with the judge, people arguing whether he's biased or not. And I thought she would be able to help me put that into words better than I could. I think you guys know I use some creative language when I get frustrated and I don't quite know how to say something. Thanks, and if you want to hear more from Rachel, which you definitely should, I will put a link to her Instagram in the comments of this video.
Okay, so big news in the Diddy trial today. Okay. The jury came back after 60 or 70 minutes of deliberating and said that one juror is refusing to follow the judge's instructions, and they can't continue to deliberate because one juror won't deliberate properly, which is fascinating.
What does that even mean?
I mean, we don't know, right? Because we didn't get any more details, but they're basically saying
I'm like, what does that even mean? How does that even happen? Like, what are you talking about?
And it's got to be pretty bad after just an hour, right? Because it's one thing if after 3 or 4 days, they're like, look, there's one juror who doesn't want to, go through each charge or whatnot, right? That's a decision that sometimes you can come to after 3 or 4 days. But after an hour, one juror is so bad that they're already telling on him. That's really bad. It's got to mean that there's some huge problem. And the interesting thing to me is this juror, he's 51 years old, I think. He's got several advanced degrees, and he lives in Manhattan with his domestic
advanced
partner.
Degrees. Wait, first of all, how do people know this shit? Is it that public? I had no idea. And also,
those
what are they in?
Yes, I think it's molecular biology. It's in things that I read the words and didn't exactly even know what that meant, which tells you it's an advanced science.
No, I mean,
yeah, maybe, right? Maybe he's refusing to deliberate because he has some advanced scientific knowledge of baby oil. I don't know.
Jesus Christ.
But it's somebody who, by all accounts, should understand the jury instructions and not, I mean, if you can get an advanced degree in molecular biology, you can understand jury instructions. So I'm very interested to see what that is about. And the defense wanted to basically tell the jurors oh, don't worry about it. He's doing a fine job.
What?
Which tells me that the defense thinks that he's a juror that would favor them. So very interesting.
But then why would you say that? Do you want people to know that you think that? Why would you say that?
Oh, so basically each side had to tell the judge what they wanted to tell the jury in response to their note that we have a problem juror. And the prosecution said, oh, we have to tell them stop being a problem, follow all the rules. It's so important. And the defense wanted to tell them no big deal. Just keep going. Keep doing what you do. So that to me suggests that the defense thinks that he's a good juror for them.
That sounds like a bad idea, though.
What do you mean?
You can send all sorts of signals with that. I don't know.
Yeah, so the judge is not going to give either of their proposed instructions.
Oh, that's good.
She's going to give a different instruction. Yeah. No, I know. But so anyway, it's just fascinating because I feel like we don't, in all these trials, we don't pay a lot of attention to jury questions. There aren't always a lot of them. And Obviously, the Karen Reed jury had a big jury question. So it's just kind of interesting to see how that's unfolding.
I saw that. I saw you talking about that. And you said it was the question they did not ask in the last trial. What was that about?
Yeah. So in the last trial, basically what happened was they came back after deliberating for a while and kept saying, we're hung, we're hung. And the judge eventually declared a mistrial on every single count and sent the jury away without kind of inquiring further as to why they thought they were hung. And then when the jury came out of the courthouse and started doing interviews, they made it very clear, oh, we agreed that she was not guilty of almost every charge. There was just one we couldn't decide on, so we were hung, which is actually not how the law works in Massachusetts, right? In Massachusetts and most other places, as long as you can reach a unanimous verdict on one count, that count is decided. So if you're charged with, not you, but anybody, right? If one is charged,
I mean, don't rule that out.
No. If one is charged with manslaughter and assault, and the jury says, oh, they definitely did not commit manslaughter, but we're not sure if they committed assault or not. The jury can say, we acquit you, you're acquitted, you're not guilty on manslaughter, but we couldn't reach a decision on assault. So that count has to be retried. So that's theoretically what should have happened to her, is she should only have been retried on one tiny little crime. But because the jury didn't actually put that on the record, they just kind of left the courthouse, which was a mistake by the judge. There was no official record that the jury had decided that. So she had to be retried for everything. And then what was so crazy about this case was the second jury came in with a question for the judge, this whole retrial, that basically proved that they were having the exact same problem the first jury did. And they said, well, what if we all believe she's not guilty of everything, except there's one count we can't decide on? Are we a hung jury? And you would think that the judge would want to jump up and say, no, you're not. You can decide on one count. And instead, this judge said, oh, well, I just can't comment on that.
Why?
And so,
why?
So she had two reasons. The first was, she said it would be improperly commenting on the consequences of a verdict, which is bullshit, right? Because improperly commenting on the consequences of a verdict is talking about punishment, right? If a jury comes in and says, if a jury comes in and says, we want to know, will you put him in jail if we convict him? The judge can and must say, you don't get to concern yourself with that. You just decide guilty or not guilty. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they're a hung jury is not the consequences of a verdict. And then when that didn't really fly, she said, oh, it's an improper hypothetical because you're just saying, if we did this. Right? So there were a bunch of people, me included, who thought that the same thing was going to happen with the second jury that happened with the first, because the judge wasn't going to answer their question. But fortunately, they figured it out.
Well, how many times can that happen?
I mean, it could happen an infinite number of times.
Is that not kind of fucked?
Yeah, it's super fucked. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of people felt it was very unfair. I think it was very unfair that she had to be retried for all of the crimes, even when the jury had unanimously acquitted her. But there was really no other option because there was no formal appropriate record that they actually had acquitted her. That was just what the jurors said in interviews.
People from the jurors from the first trial, didn't they come out and say, like, we don't think she was guilty of murder?
Yeah, or manslaughter or anything. And they were just divided, which is so crazy, presumably, over whether she was drunk driving or not. They couldn't even decide if she was drunk driving when she admitted she was drunk driving, right? So, I mean, when people ask me, was the Karen Reed verdict the right verdict? Yes, I think it was. Yeah. And one of the big reasons is if the jury had not convicted her of drunk driving, then I would have said, this is not an acceptable verdict, right? Oh, really? She testified she had several drinks and was wasted. I mean, she should have gotten convicted of the DUI. And
people are so rough on people when they get DUIs these days, especially. They're like, you're such a piece of shit and stuff. But she was accused of murder. And obviously it didn't look like she did that to enough people where it's just like, they're going to overlook the DUI, which I think is it's not funny, but it's a little funny.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and a couple people, the people that are really anti Karen Reed, they say like, never before has a drunk driver been like so beloved. And
And
look,
that's
that's
totally true.
true.
Though.
I
I
mean,
mean, well, look
she
at
admitted
Phelps.
to, yeah, she admitted to basically driving so drunk that she didn't know if she ran into a human. Like that's really bad. That's really bad, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And we kind of laugh about it now. And look, I think that, a lot of the things that happened to her, she was clearly, prosecuted and maybe unfairly maligned. I don't know, but she she isn't like a local hero either. And I do think the kind of like
It kind of feels
people
like she is, though. I
she
mean, when I look at
could
the internet,
be.
and just as someone who hasn't really watched this, I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, wow, this lady's like a fucking angel. But
Right. But no, she literally was like, her defense was, yes, I was so drunk that I thought I might have hit him, but I don't think I did.
congrats.
Like, oh, good for you. Yeah, and
I'm
it
definitely
is kind
cutting
of
that out.
crazy. It is kind of crazy, right? That people
Well,
would,
no, I remember, like just anybody that I've known in my personal life who's gotten like a DUI or something,
yeah,
not great. Or like Phelps, like I said, Michael Phelps, when he got his first DUI when he was really young, and people just kind of forgot about it. But the
yeah,
second DUI he got was sometime after Beijing, when he got those medal records, and people were like tabloid posting him smoking a bong, which who gives a fuck after you win that many medals in the Olympics? Just smoke a bong, I don't care. So like some asshole decided to post a photo of him smoking a bong, and then he gets a DUI sometime after 2012 when he performed really shitty, and then like everybody's like, Michael Phelps is a terrible person. We hate him so much.
look, I think
And
it,
so I look at like this, and I look at that, and I'm kind of like, the standards here are whacked out of my mind. Like I don't know, I don't understand, but
for only
whatever.
driving drunk and not killing anyone while she did. Yeah,
Yeah,
I it's wild.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that the sort of local hero thing had to do with the people on the other side being police officers.
Well,
It's a
there was
group
I
of
know there was
people
a
that
lot
are,
about. Go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, no, it's a group of people that's easier to hate, like, and it's easier to kind of, rail on. It's her against the police officers who are not a
Oh
beloved,
yeah, no, no,
section of
definitely not.
society right now.
Yeah,
So I think had it been her and like the local fishermen, it would have been a different story.
yeah. Well, that would have been a weirder story for sure.
Yeah, totally.
I
Like,
probably
what
would
did
have
the
paid
local
attention to that one.
fishermen do with him
Yeah, somebody's like
in
police
that?
corruption. I'm like, yeah, that happens every day. Fishermen,
Yeah,
oh, I'm in.
fishery
Yeah.
corruption. That now we have a story. Totally.
Yeah, right. Oh man. All right. Well, so that judge, I guess, is also somebody that I saw a lot of criticism towards, a lot of public commenting
Yeah.
on still today. And so that is kind of a decent segue, I feel like, into Judge Lyman and Justin Baldoni's case.
Yeah.
Is getting a lot of flack right now. I know you and Omar talked pretty thoroughly about the ruling, so I'm not going to ask you too much about that. But I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of people with pitchforks out right now, where I'm kind
Yeah.
of like, this is scaring me a little bit because I'm worried because like even if he made a bad call, I don't know. I can't say with 100% certainty that was out of bias, and I know there's a lot of people who have put a lot of things forward, and they honestly make some good points, but and I can't tell them that they're wrong.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like not somebody who leads with like
Yeah.
something is like evil here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of, I don't know. What is your take on that? You told me that you don't think that he was like bought off by Hollywood, I guess.
I
And so
don't.
so walk
I
me
don't
through your.
think so. I certainly can't say any more than you can, right? Really, none of us can. There are certain decisions, and this is I think why Karen Reed is such a good segue. There are certain decisions that are so bad that you kind of say to yourself, what? Something is amiss. It doesn't mean anybody's biased or doing anything illegal, but that really stand out as this decision was so wrong. Like the judge not giving the jury instruction to clarify for them what a hung jury means.
Mhm.
That it just kind of really does raise an issue of, God, how could the judge be that wrong? I just
Right,
don't think Lyman's decision here was that wrong. I disagreed with it.
right.
I was very surprised that he didn't give leave to amend,
Yeah.
but this is federal court and they did have a chance to amend their pleadings. It was it was voluntary prior to a motion to dismiss. I'm not sure I would have made the same decision, and it was surprising, but it's certainly was not like the kind of decision out of left field where how could you possibly justify something this insane? He must be bought off by the rich, like Hollywood power machine.
Yeah.
I also just think that's a real stretch to think that a federal court judge is being bought off by people in Hollywood. It just
This is
is.
not the first time that I've heard something like that, though. So I'm wondering, like, how do you explain that to people who are just like not really familiar with the court system? They're only following this because it's a high public interest case. They're not used to normal procedure. How do you explain that in a way that doesn't make them feel like you're being condescending? You know, like I'm not saying that you are. I'm saying that people are sensitive to this. So like they're going to be like, you're being condescending. No, how do you explain that to people who need to understand, but also without kind of honestly offending them? Because I'm having a hard time
Yeah.
with that.
No, it is. And it's, part of I think the easiest way to explain it without offending people is what is morally correct is not always what is legally correct. The outcome that is the most satisfying and fair from a morality or personal standpoint is not always the correct one legally. And so to me, if he was making a decision that Blake Lively is the good person and Justin Baldoni is the bad person, oh boy, I would have a lot of concerns about that decision right now, given what we've seen.
Yeah.
Given what we've seen. But that's not what he did. He made a decision based on very strict pleading standards under the federal rules of civil procedure. And they were not outrageous decisions. I don't agree. And I think leave to amend should have probably been granted. But I think that a lot of lawyers out there expected a lot of these claims to fail legally. And that's not because Justin
That was
Baldoni
definitely the
doesn't.
sentiment. I felt
Yeah,
like.
and it's not that he doesn't have something to complain about. I think he does. It's just he didn't have strong counterclaims here. He just didn't. He's got a really good argument that she has a BS lawsuit against him, I think, from what we've seen so far.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily translate into legal claims. And I think that the other way to explain it is when people file a lawsuit, you're largely protected from being sued back just because you filed a bogus lawsuit.
That's so fucked, though. I think is like the general
Yeah.
opinion is like that's so. So how do you?
And I get
how do you
that.
reconcile that? It's like that's so fucked up. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's like, don't you want to protect people who need to do that? But then you have these people who are like these rich, famous, powerful people who are now using it to kind of retroactively correct their bad marketing. When she was marketing this film, it was kind of like, hey, battered spouses, I got a deal for you. Like this shampoo, it's 100% off
Yeah.
the chain. So
Yeah.
what?
And like
she's,
wear your
mad about the
florals.
bad reaction to that. Like I don't
Right.
understand. How are you so stupid that you don't understand that was the
I
wrong
know.
thing to do? So-
Absolutely. She
And then
earned all
you
of her
look at
bad
this.
press.
And
Yeah.
then you look at this as like, how could you protect that person with the legal system? It's because you have to do that to protect 100 little people who are not Blake Lively's.
Yes. That's exactly
So,
the answer.
But it sucks so much because the high profile cases like this,
It
it's
does.
like I'm like this horrible rich person who's like just a horrible,
Yeah.
terrible person is getting away with this because of those protections. And
Right.
so hard to watch. So like I'm having a hard time kind of communicating to other people. Like, no, I don't think the whole system is a scam. But
Yeah.
yeah, this sucks.
No, it does suck. It absolutely does suck. And
Yeah.
the best way I think to explain it is, it's similar to, all the people that are talking about, shouldn't the New York Times be in trouble here? And the answer is yes and no, right? Because clearly they were part of this collusion to, advance this story, to not really fact check it, to drop it on Baldoni with 24 hours notice and not give it, or 4 hours notice, whatever the case may be, not give him time to respond. They cherry picked text messages too and claimed they reviewed them,
Thousands of
But
pages. Yeah.
right, exactly. But at the end
Or
of the
how many
day-
months? How many months were you going over like thousands of pages? Like,
Right, and you didn't notice that you had cherry picked them. You didn't notice the 4 that came after the ones you printed. But the problem is, from a broader perspective, as a society, we don't actually want to tell the New York Times and other publications that if you publish a legal document, which is what they did, okay?
Right.
If you publish allegations in a legal document and they turn out to have been brought in bad faith by the person bringing them, now you are on the hook for billions of dollars. Because that would really, I mean, think about it. We would never hear about Diddy. We never would have any reporting on Diddy, because what if Cassie, what if they had concerns about her veracity, right? We never would have heard about that lawsuit because they'd be afraid to print it, and we don't really actually want to put publications in that position.
No, absolutely not.
And the times like this where it really feels unfair, because it is honestly the sacrifice for having a media, that is able to publish other things and able to report on true crime stories without being concerned that if it turns out the person didn't do it, now they're going to be sued. And everyone's going to, dive into like, well, did you review every text message? So
yeah, I mean, with
it's unsatisfying.
But this one in particular, you got this journalist Megan Twohey, who champions herself as this Me Too activist back to 2017 or whenever this started to pick up, and she claims, to be like kind of one of the faces of this movement. And she says she reviewed thousands of pages of text messages, and yet she left so much out that it kind of seems like you can't put your trust in these people anymore. And it's kind of outrageous. So like you want to trust somebody with that, somebody who was doing so much good at some point and is now just kind of like, well, I'm going to forgo actually paying attention to the whole picture here in favor of pushing the story of somebody who's like has a little bit more power and influence in Hollywood and can, oh my goodness, I just dropped my bottle of water. I'm sorry. I'm going to drop that. But, and has so much influence and could do more for my story here if I'm writing her story and she's giving me an exclusive. I'm just gonna push forward with this, and it doesn't matter. So then it's kind of like all of a sudden this switch is kind of flipped, where it's like, oh wow, so what was really the point of all of this in the first place? All of this Me Too stuff that she did, and that everybody who came after her and that she worked with did.
But there's a correction for that, and it may not be a perfect correction for Justin Baldoni, but there's a market correction that can happen there, which is if people no longer trust her, and that's the prevailing sentiment.
Yeah.
Stop. Don't read her stuff. Stop patronizing the New York Times. I mean, there is an extent to which there's a possible correction available. If everybody feels like this major publication has led us astray, the market should do something to correct for that. That's not a perfect solution for Justin Baldoni, who, has suffered as a result of this tremendously and unfairly. But it's not like she has it's not like people cannot choose to stop patronizing this publication or couldn't choose to stop reading her because she's done this. It doesn't have to be a defamation lawsuit. Has he really? I mean, I understand from a personal standpoint, this has been tremendously difficult to suffer through these allegations. So difficult for the family. Right. Will Hollywood really not touch him anymore?
I don't fucking know.
It's not like all press is good press, because I know that's not true, right? Blake
Lively's not when you're being offended, you're being accused of being a sex offender. No.
Exactly. But
if you're being accused of being a dick, maybe. But if you're being accused of being a sexual predator, no.
Maybe, but and of course not. I'm not suggesting that like he hasn't suffered tremendously and in a legally compensable way, because emotional damages, things like that, all recognized. Mm-hmm. But I also just haven't, I don't know if it's ruined his reputation. I feel like they have come out of this where he's the good guy. He's wearing the white hat, and he's going to wear the white hat this whole time. Mm-hmm. I feel like nobody's opinion is going to be changed anymore.
I think that it feels that way to me most of the time, but that's because our algorithms and our algorithms and shit kind of push us towards our own biases these days.
That's true. Yeah.
So like there's bigger, much bigger channels like Legal Eagle and stuff like that who are and Nick Vial who are saying these awful things about him, like he didn't amend because what she said was true and all this crazy shit, and like they're not even taking anything else into account, and I don't know, they're just really running with that, and even the Daily Mail today, and it's just, I don't know, it's so crazy. So like I don't see much of that because obviously my feed is catered to my pre-established interests. And so I have to wait and see if somebody sends me something. But like at the same time, it's not like there's no hit there to his reputation. And it's not like there's no criticism or nothing that he should be afraid of. It's just, I don't see it most of the time. So
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know the answer to that.
right.
It's horrible what's happening to them. Like there's no doubt. I just think there's a path out for him. I feel like the way that he's combated this has been very, very smart and strategic, and he's hired the right people. And I feel like there's a way to fight out of it. Not that he should be in this position at all, which he shouldn't, obviously, but I feel like he could still be okay.
These John Doe lawsuits. So I understand that's like a necessary thing, and I'm thinking back to like Gingras versus the Redditor. Okay,
Yeah,
which is just nutty. It's like there's somebody here is alleged to have done something wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
And you don't know who they are because it's a random internet person. So that's that. If he was correct, which he's never correct. But like if he was correct, that would be like a proper use of like a John Doe.
It's exactly.
So when you're filing a John Doe lawsuit and you're saying there's a contractual dispute here, or like some sort of contractual violation, you have to know who you're in. Like, how do you not know who you're in contract with?
No, they filed this. It's pretty obvious they filed it to excuse Jones' work from whatever contractual obligations they had not to turn over these documents, right? I mean, that's very obvious. But to me, that's a bone that Jones works. And is it Abel? Is that who it is?
Abel used to work for Stephanie Jones. She was the main, person doing the account for Wayfair, and then she went off on her own, and Stephanie Jones took the stuff off her phone. So
that's a fight that should be fought between Stephanie Abel and Jones Works.
They have a separate. They have a separate lawsuit, but it's like a related case now, I guess, in federal instead of state.
Yeah, that's a bone. The only person that's been harmed in a way that you have one has standing to contest are the parties to that contract. Because the only reason to file that Doe lawsuit was so Stephanie Abel could say, "Oh gosh, I got a subpoena. I guess I have to turn this stuff over," right? Because everybody knows that when you have contracts with confidentiality clauses, there are exceptions for legal proceedings, because you can't stop someone from testifying in a legal proceeding, right? If they're subpoenaed or if they're validly called to a court, they can't go in and say, "Oh, sorry, I promised in a contract not to talk about this," right? So, and again, that's also a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But so clearly what they did was they filed this lawsuit so that she could have the cover to give them the text messages.
Well, she is alleged to have sent that to them the day she got way before the subpoena was ever sent, but like the day that she got the information off the phone. And then
so that's a problem for her. Yeah.
She did not fight that at all. She did not say anything about it when they issued it to her, even though she knew like these were her clients that are in a dispute with Blake.
Right.
And she didn't warn them at all, which I guess some people have said is not like a legal issue, but on a personal level and as a client, a prospective client, I would look at that and say, "Fuck no, I don't want to work with you." You know what I mean? So
in California, it would be a legal issue. In California, they would have had to provide.
I'm a little confused about the choice of law stuff.
Yeah. So if this were a California proceeding, in order to issue that subpoena, they would have had to, the party issuing the subpoena, so Blake's shell company, would have had to, before serving the subpoena on Jones Works, provide what's called consumer notice, which is tell the clients, consumers, that they are seeking this subpoena that may divulge their records and give them a chance to get out in front of it, basically. And it's for exactly this reason, right? Because there are circumstances where the client is going to have or the consumer is going to have much more at stake than the entity that has the records. So if this were a California subpoena and a California state proceeding, they would have had to go about it that way. That there's no consumer notice requirement in New York. So, there isn't, but that whole concept exists in the law. And in some states like California, you actually couldn't have served the subpoena without giving, Wayfair an opportunity to jump in there. And look, I think there may very well be an excellent argument that this was a breach of her contract to turn them over prior to receiving a subpoena, or to not contest a subpoena, that is clearly brought in bad faith. Those are all possibilities they're just not possibilities that are really relevant to the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni situation, because they're really not the parties that have the standing to contest it.
I'm confused about, like, so she's arguing that they owe her money per the contract for this time period, but also she didn't honor the contract for that time period. So why are you suing them for money? But also, you just kind of gave this shit up. So that doesn't make sense to me.
No, me neither.
Okay.
I don't know. Right? I mean, they would not be the first ones to bring a baseless lawsuit, right? I don't know who's suing whom in terms of Jones Works, but I do know that if there's an issue, this is the way to think of it. Honestly, the easiest parallel is, right, if somebody, if a friend of mine leaves something here in my home and the cops bust in without a warrant and toss my place and find it, that person does not have standing to contest the search. I have standing to contest the search. And if they bust in without a proper warrant and it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, and then they try to bring, the bloody knife into my trial, I'm good, right? Keeping it out. But if they find your bloody knife in my house, right, you don't have any.
That would never happen. I keep all my knives on me at all times. Okay.
Very smart. It's smart. Keep them in your own house. No, but if they find, if they find something belonging that incriminates somebody else, that person does not have standing typically, unless they had an expectation of privacy, even though it seems very unfair. And it's like, well, wait a minute. They violated my rights. They violated somebody's rights. Why isn't that enough to get the evidence kicked? Well, it's just not, because they didn't violate your rights. It's a similar concept here. Is they don't really have the proper standing to challenge it per se. Okay.
Well, I'm not gonna lie to you, that's very fucking confusing to me, but
I know.
I'm trying to understand, so.
No, that's okay. It's amazing that you're covering this. It's
frustrating, yeah.
No, it's amazing that you're covering this in so much detail without, it's hard without a law degree. It's impressive.
I know Omar said I went through like 8-hour streams. It's a lie. It was like 5.5 hours. So but I will go through everything so I can say, like, look, I looked at all of this. You're never gonna find a time where I didn't do the work. You know what I mean? It's just there's gonna be some stuff that I don't understand because it's not my area.
And look, any lawyer that tells you they understand all this stuff off the top of their head without looking it up is lying.
Well, David says. No,
oh yeah, I mean, except for Mr. Gingras.
With 100% certainty.
Right? 100% certainty, because that's what they teach you in law school. Always be 100% certain. But yeah, I mean, it's the same with lawyers. Like any lawyer that tells you, oh yeah, I know all of these, I know the answer to all these legal questions off the back of my, no, that's not true, right? Anybody who's, even people that have gone through law school and have been practicing for decades have to look a lot of this stuff up and go and read the law. But that's what law school trains you to do. It doesn't actually teach you the law. It teaches you how to figure out and analyze the law.
Right. I mean, two of my closest friends I don't talk to my friends and family about this stuff. They ask me questions like, do not ask me that. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Right. But two of my closest friends, they're both lawyers. One's in family law, one's in corporate. And so they obviously, we talk about stuff like this a lot, and not this in particular. Anything I'm covering on my YouTube channel is off limits. I'm dead of talking about that.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Because they don't act like they know everything. I've never met a lawyer who is really good at their job who acted like they knew everything.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. No, and it's like this is one of the. I mean, this is a much broader conversation about what's wrong with the country right now. But the fact that everybody knows and has an opinion on everything is like one of the big reasons our country is falling apart right now, right? Is because we should really normalize saying, you know what, I'm not informed enough to have an opinion on that.
Yeah.
That should be much more common than it is right now. And I will say that too, even about legal things, I don't know. And especially all the time with Laura Owens, right? When they said, oh yeah, well in Arizona, what's going to happen when the Supreme Court, I don't know. I'm not just going to I'm not just going to say the answer, No. I don't know the answer. Right? I don't know how many days the Supreme Court is going to wait to rule on a petition for review because I don't
probably 4.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it's between 4 and 87,
Jesus Christ.
I mean, no. So rather than spout out some, I'm 100% sure bullshit. The answer is, I don't know, but I could maybe go look it up and maybe figure it out or maybe not.
I mean, you could look it up and still be wrong, so we just don't.
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
that's a bigger conversation about the world and our country right now. But yes,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
there should be more people out there that are willing to say they don't know. And you know, and this applies to Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni too. We don't know the truth. Okay? We can have very informed opinions because we've seen a lot of things, and we can have very educated opinions based on what we've seen. But all of our opinions always have to be couched in based on what we have seen, based
Mhm.
on what I've been able to review, based on the information I have received, because none of us were there. And I know it seems silly, but
It doesn't seem silly, no. It seems like, well, I know there's a lot of people who are gonna hear that and be like, "Oh
I'd be
my
very mad
god,
at
you're
me.
yes,
You're such a
exactly."
lawyer.
But I don't know. I don't actually feel that way at all. I think you know that. I'm very biased. I
Yeah.
don't hide that. I'm very upfront about that. Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to change my mind. At the same time, I understand people who feel differently than that. I understand why, and I understand that they think they're saying and doing the right thing when they talk about it. So I'm not trying to fight people all the time. It's
Yeah.
exhausting, and I don't know, but I understand where that comes from and how that's the honestly the right kind of mindset to have if you're just watching
Yeah.
this as a spectator. But I'm obviously very, like I said, I'm not trying to hide it. I'm very, 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 very biased. So
Right, but you're not, but the fact that you're open about that is the only thing that matters because it's transparency, right? And I really think it's absurd for anybody to give anybody hell for saying, look, I understand the fence sitting thing. Oh, well, I can't have an opinion on anything because, that's not helpful. Okay, I get
that's
it.
me like 90% of the time.
Yeah, but that's okay. It's okay. But I can understand people saying, well, what do I want to listen to you sit on the fence? No. But I really don't understand people that are super critical of people that will couch an opinion in the term like based on what I have seen. Of course it's based on what you've seen. You're almost just stating the obvious, right? And
Mhm.
anybody that would come down that hard on somebody for just saying, look, I wasn't there. Okay. Could there be things I don't know? Of course there could. But based on what I've seen, I believe this. Anybody who would say that that's, inadequate in some way, I think that's ridiculous. I wouldn't trust any opinion that that person held if they can't at least respect somebody for saying my opinion is limited to what I know and what I've seen, because it speaks for itself. Have you ever seen the Good Wife, the TV show?
I've heard of it. No, no.
Okay, it's a legal, procedural, but there's this one judge, this one quirky judge that they come to all the
Mhm.
time, and she's known for always wanting everyone to say, like all the lawyers when they're arguing, to say, in my opinion, XYZ. So all the lawyers who have been before her a lot just know to say, like, in my opinion, this motion, blah 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 blah, in my opinion. And then when this one lawyer, one of the stars of the show, comes in and doesn't know that, and the judge keeps saying, well, in your opinion, he says, like, well, isn't it obvious? Of course it's in my opinion. I mean, and she's like, well, I just want you to remind us and yourself that this is in your opinion. And he's like, well, what is anything I
Why do you
say
need a
not in
reminder
my
at that point?
opinion?
Jeez.
Yeah, why do I
What?
need to remind anyone? And that's, I mean, it's kind of,
Once is
kind of,
good.
yeah, once is good, right? But it's in my opinion, Your Honor. I'm not purporting it to be anything else. I wasn't there. I'm saying in my opinion. She's like, well, I just want you to say that every sentence. So I understand, and it's kind of making fun of that a little bit. I get it a little bit, the people that are, couching, but I think it is actually important to remind people, especially when it's so heated, that it is just my opinion based on the information available to me. So I actually think, like, the silly, like, reminding everybody that it's just my opinion, I think that actually is important.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like you were in a situation watching something? I'm not going to ask you about your personal life because I know you probably can't just like say stuff like this. So like I'm not going to ask you about your personal life or cases or anything
Okay.
like that. But have you ever saw something where you were like, wow, this is really disappointing to me. I don't know how to feel about this in like the legal system or how an outcome was or like, something like that. Have you ever been like really
Oh,
disappointed
yes.
and felt like super, super down about it? Like,
Yes, at the beginning of my career. But also, I will tell you that I had a huge trial where the judge was disqualified at the end of the proceedings, all the way back to like a month into the proceeding for
Have you
failing
talked about that
to.
before? I feel like I've heard you say that.
I may have said that, where the judge was disqualified for failing to disclose like 15 conflicts of interest over the course of the
It sounds
proceeding.
vaguely familiar, but I don't
Yeah,
really remember. So go ahead.
and you have to go through a huge process to have that happen, right? You have to go to a different court system because they don't even want a judge in your county deciding that. You have to go to we had to go to Orange County, like a whole different superior court system in California,
Mhm.
who found that there were undisclosed conflicts that were so significant that the entire case had to be redone.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'll just kind of leave it at that. I'm not going to call out anybody, but
No,
I
yeah,
mean,
of
how
course.
do and there's, by the way, ultimately, the trial was redone and a better result was reached. But you
Yeah,
can't
we're
cure the
excited.
harm of that. It was
No,
years and millions of dollars.
right. It's also
So,
just a lot of, I mean, for people involved, it's obviously very traumatic. I feel
yeah,
like.
years of their life, you know?
Yeah. People are
So,
always saying stuff like you can appeal, but like no, the damage is done. Like you've been through that at this point, and you've in places where you've been wronged. It's like you've been through
yeah,
that, and you've been kind of like helpless and hopeless, and there was nothing you could do. And somebody who like the only person who had the power to help you said no. You
yeah,
can't undo that.
yeah.
So
No. And look, I think there are trends in the family court system in Los Angeles that
right.
are not going in the right direction. And I think that it's but as a lawyer, you have to, if you get personally invested like that, you can't practice law. You just can't. There has to be, you have to care about the job you're doing, but not because it personally tugs at your heartstrings. I
Mm.
started out, when I was in law school. I really wanted to be a prosecutor, and there was a very elite prosecution clinic at Stanford that you had to be like a third year to get into. I didn't get in my second year, but I got into the criminal defense clinic, which I was also very interested in. And we were doing three strikes stuff. People that had been incarcerated for 20 years, for stealing a bicycle. And I had a trial of someone that was actually not appealing a conviction, but who was going to trial for throwing a rock through a window. And it was being charged as a burglary because the allegation was there was an intent to commit a felony when the rock was thrown, which makes it a burglary and a third strike in California.
Mhm.
And he was facing, I think, 37 and a half years to life for that. And we were able to plead him down to 13 years. And that was a huge
Long fucking
victory
time, though.
legally. And I, over the course of doing that, I said, this is too, it hurts too. I can't. I don't want to do this kind of work. It's just, I, I don't have the stomach for it. I don't have the heart for it. It's, I don't know. It's too much. It's too hard.
So then, why being
So
a
I,
divorce attorney? Yeah.
well, so I know I went into civil litigation, right?
Okay.
And that's where I spent like most of my career. But then I went into divorce litigation
Why though?
for many other reasons. I mean, that was a lifestyle decision. That was a getting out of a firm where I was working, many, many, many hours that I loved. I loved the big firm I worked at,
Yeah.
and I loved the work that I did.
Yeah.
And I have, nothing but good things to say about my time, which I think a lot of people don't about big firms. I loved mine, and if I ever had to go back or wanted to go back to a big firm, I would go back there. I just loved the people and the work.
Would you ever want to go back?
I doubt it.
Okay.
I doubt it. It's hard. It's a lot. It's a very hard lifestyle.
Mhm.
Um, but if I went back, that'd be the first place I would want to go.
I mean,
But
hard lifestyles doesn't seem to be an issue for you. So.
I mean, that's true. Yeah, but it wasn't that hard before. It wasn't as hard before we were traveling.
Yeah, yeah, I got you.
It's changed a lot, but I wanted to have more control over my schedule, more time with my family, things like that. And so I left after right after I had my first kid. So
Mhm.
it was a lifestyle decision, and I'm not loving the practice of family law anymore.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy it.
Why is that?
But
What changed?
And nothing changed. I never really liked it to begin with.
Oh, good. Okay.
But I like it less now. It's look,
Yeah.
there's a lot of I think that the law is trending in ways that are not positive. And I also think it's like you are working with people who are going through the worst time in their life and that are dealing with the worst things in their life. And it is very hard to at once want to help and do right by them, but at the same time, you just can't get invested. And there's just there's so much ugliness, and that it's just not, it's not civil.
I feel like we got enough. Let me end this and then we'll talk for a second.
Please.
Unless there's something else you wanted to say.
No.
Yeah, okay.
I'm at your disposal, ma'am.
That's never a good idea. All right, guys, that's all I had for today, but I was really happy to sit down and just get to listen to her thoughts on some of this stuff. I'm sure we can find some more stuff to talk about soon. We didn't really get into Laura Owens, but maybe we will soon. So, if I didn't scare her off, which is, I think we're about 50-50 on that one. So, thanks everybody. Don't forget to hit the like button for me, and I will see you all soon.